in the budget we're presenting and you voted on, that includes major staffing changes, not included in the default budget. As that would include keeping the school basically operating in the same, a similar fashion.
Right, yeah, well, what I'm saying is, the proposed changes eliminate like $500,000.
Above that,
Well, but remember, our proposed changes also include a shift of costs, so you'd be taking the cuts without any of the additions, so you'd be saying, well, we're okay with your cuts, but what we approved over here for additions, like a curriculum coordinator and some other improvements, you're saying, but we don't want any of those.
But
That's not the definition of default budget.
the default budget has nothing to do with the budget we submit.
Nothing at all.
The default budget is what,
it's the approved budget, it's the approved current budget that was voted on by the taxpayers. It's that budget, plus or minus any changes. So when you talk staffings, the current year's staffing, so every person we have employed in the district is counted in the default budget. What isn't counted is any changes we made. So we reduced paras to get teacher, we did a bunch of shifting to get more teachers as opposed to paras, to shift that support. That wouldn't be, that change isn't counted in the default budget.
no, that's the proposed
That's the
budget.
proposed.
Yeah,
budget,
if you
correct.
included all those changes, you would have the proposed budget, because the proposed budget does incorporate all those contractual obligations that were in, as well as increases in energy costs. All those exact items are in the proposed budget. And if you were to make the default budget equal all the changes we made, it would actually be essentially the same budget as what you proposed. The default budget is in case the voter,
The new additions are new contracts, are they not? Will be new contracts.
not if we get a default budget, I would presume. I mean, you could
So
still.
if we got a
staffing
default
change.
budget, it really wouldn't matter. We'd be rolling in the dough, given what we're.
Right, so if you got the default budget, I
All
mean,
we
you
do
can
is
still make
exactly
those
what we
changes,
want
but you
and
just still have to,
Correct.
listen,
Maintain a
at the
bigger
end of the
fund
day, it's a
Yes.
bottom line budget, so
We could all-
if you got default, we'd have $300,000 more to spend.
Right. All right, so we've covered, I'm sorry, Sue?
Well, just a little clarification. If we released, say, 5 teachers, I think in the past, if we weren't going to fill those spots again in any foreseeable future, we would also subtract that money from the default budget. And I don't know if that's maybe what you're talking about. But this is not quite the same. This is, okay, releasing some of this staff, but replacing them with this staff. It's more of a wash, so if you,
Yeah, but it's
Yeah, but
still
the default
contracts
budget,
for the new employees.
the default budget
And
is
it's not
very,
included in the default budget.
the default budget is statute defined.
Right.
It includes
Yes.
this, and this.
But there's some,
And the intent behind it was so that if your school budget was skyrocketing, the voters could turn around and say, well, we'll just stay with what we had last year. When you're cutting costs, you end up in the opposite situation. Your default budget is more than your proposed budget because you're cutting costs.
That's what they can put ordinary increases on the default budget.
Well, the idea is that you're basically, if no one can come to an agreement on the budget that's supposed to be passed, it's designed to say, well, you're still gonna have a budget to operate off of, so you don't go out of business. And then it's gonna say, also, you're gonna have some obligations that still need to be met, that you can't say, well, we're not paying the heating bill. Or we're only gonna pay what we paid last year. The contractor's gonna say, well, that doesn't work for us. So it's designed to give you, well, you're stuck with the same thing you had last year with enough
Necessary
increases that, but they have to also match something. So like Vincent said, he wants to know what the increases are to property and liability, and workers' comp, which I think workers' comp was around 10%, and then a lot less for property and liability. Both came to about 100,000 together, off the top of my head. But it's designed so that you don't end up without a budget. in case the voters just can't get a budget passed.
Right, or in a case where a school board wanted to propose $1 million more than what the default budget would automatically be, then the voters could say, no, I don't want to go for that, I'm voting against it, but we still open the schools because of the definition of the default budget by RSA.
And both clearly fall under your tax cap too.
The thing that's hard to explain to people is, we're doing a good job by coming in lower than what the default budget comes in at, and they get mad because they don't have
Because
the
they-
choice to vote for the lower number. Well, we're,
Giving you the lower number.
yeah, so that's the part that confuses everybody, myself included, every year, so. Okay, is there further discussion on these three topics, which we have covered all together, 9A, B, and C? All right, so when it comes time to agree on that number, we can just break it out.
I have no problem doing that. I mean, clearly I had to break it out to even come up with it, so. And,
Right.
I almost put them all in there.
All right. Okay, so that brings us now to 9D, I'm sorry, warrant communications plan. The roles and deadline dates for content edits, creation, and mailing.
So I'm gonna pass out two documents, because again, this is kind of a combined, step, okay. Just one of each,
Oh,
that I can
no.
give to these guys, sorry. So what I have here is, the first one is a two-pager, and this is a front and back, I think you guys have it as a front and back. This is the proposed warrants that we developed based on our conversations, as well as trying to fix the issue of the trustees of the trust fund. So we have Mike's been working with DRA on that, so if we can start there. Again, at your January meeting, that's where you'll have to declare and approve to move forward to the budget hearing, all your warrant articles, so you have a little bit of time. Basically, Article 1, the top is your just information about your sessions. Article 1 is to choose your school district officials. Article 2 will be your teacher's contract, so I obviously left blanks because we don't know what that looks like yet for dollar amounts. By the way, just Friday, January 3rd, we are scheduled for mediation. I believe we'll start at 9 o'clock. I will have more to come on that. I haven't heard back, but I think 9 o'clock should work.
PM? No, I'm just kidding, sorry.
I think at Bridgewater Town Hall. Yes? Perfect. Article 3 is the provision for a special meeting. If Article 2 is defeated, you can
And
go
before
to
I
that.
forget, who's getting the key, you or me?
I don't know. Either of us let me know.
Okay, neither do I.
3 o'clock, I'll get it for you. We'll leave the door unlocked, one of the two.
Our fobs don't work.
Article 4 is the article that will kind of fix what we have broken, which is that the school district is actually holding all of our trust funds as opposed to the trustees. This is language from the DRA. They're suggesting we put in, shall the school district vote to approve the town of Bristol's trustees of the trust funds to be the holder of the school's trust funds, to be in compliance with RSA 35-2, custody of school district reserves. They were actually able to give us, I didn't bring with me, but a summary of all of our warrant articles and reserve funds that we've had, as well as at some point in time, the school district designated Bristol as your trustees of the trust fund. So they have that on record, so.
So why do we have to do this?
Because when you opened up your trust funds, you didn't designate them as your trustees.
Didn't you just say we just did it?
No, they have on record that
Bristol
Bristol.
is,
So I have what they call the perm file for the district, which goes back to, and it shows each creation, the statute that caused them all the way up to even accepting unanticipated revenue in 1994, to adopting an official ballot of referenda and to becoming a SB 2 town 1997 and so on. And one of the reasons why we want to look at this is because Stacy was going to refer in, we should create a capital reserve for special education. Believe it or not, we already have one, which was generated in 2006. So the question is, and I don't believe we have any funds in that, but a capital reserve was generated for it.
There's no funds in it?
Not that I don't have any account for it, I asked.
Okay, what's the answer to the question, why are we having to do this again if it's already been done?
The DRA, which has on record that Bristol is supposed to be our holder of trustees of the trust funds, but we have no record of a vote being taken.
What happens if this is voted down as I expect it will be?
But you have to do this by RSA. Then you have to find an alternative. The actual RSA,
I expect the other
States.
6 towns won't want to give one town their money to hold.
well, it's not, actually, the board's the agent on that. So they're the trustees of it, which means they're just a measure of allowing to see compliance. So for example, if the board requests funds out of the special education capital reserve, and you're asking for those funds to purchase a new walk-in freezer, they will say no. So the, actually,
But- But they have control over where the money's invested.
not necessarily, we have control,
Who's
The
the,
trustees
The
do.
trustees do.
who's Bristol's town?
Yeah.
Trustees' job.
Town treasurer or something?
Is this, Mike, is this one of those
Elected.
where we can name the school board as the trustee of the trust fund?
No, because I asked her that. So you still have to name them, and you only really have two choices. Because we're not a single community school district, you can choose another town to be the trustees of the trust. You can, these scholarships, it includes the private trust too. So right now, all of these funds are sitting in a, it's a pool of funds, an interest-bearing account in Concord. And actually, I think I even have the
Is it like the
statement on it,
municipal?
New Hampshire Public Deposit Investment Pool.
PEIP.
Yeah, so what we've done there is we have actual accounts for each one of these, from the maintenance trust to each of our scholarships, and we also have an account for the general fund. So the way that you would access these funds is you request from the trustees. I would type up what would, in a city, be a resolution, but it would be a request for the transfer of funds to the general fund. They would transfer the funds out of that trust fund to the general fund account for use. And that's how you would go about using those funds.
But what if they're not named the trustees? Because I don't expect the other towns to agree to this. So
Then we're out of
that-
compliance with the law. And then
Okay.
now we
And we
have to,
already are,
there's
right?
legal cases, and we could go on and on. But I mean, as a school board,
Legal fees out of the budget.
yeah, we can't, but we can, you can ask to see a lawyer, talk to a lawyer.
But we can't, I mean, basically, I mean, they should not be held in accounts. They should be with a trustee, and so, again, I think
The
it's
problem will be
educating.
who's named the trustee. If every town has a trustee of trust funds, right, there's 3 for my town, I imagine there are for
Yeah,
most.
I'm sure
I think every
has
town
that.
would be fine if there was one rep from every trustee of trust funds as, acting as this. So there were 7 people who were the trustees of the district's trust funds. The problem will be giving it all to one town who could withhold it.
I was gonna say they have to accept it.
Yeah.
I suppose they don't have to. can
They
go on.
don't have to.
Well, I'm just saying, you say you've got it, we don't want it.
Right, I guess, and again, I think that as a board and as us, I mean, it's our job to explain it to people and get them to understand why this is happening. They have it as Bristol, I mean, this is a legal compliance.
That won't change their mind.
Yeah, and people just need to recognize it, and the board, I guess, has to own if it doesn't pass, that we're out of compliance and it's not our fault. Yeah, I mean, I like, it's illegal what we're doing and how it's been
How
held.
long have we been illegal? 50 years?
I don't know, as long as you've had trust funds.
This is why this all came to a head.
They
is
shouldn't be
because
sitting in
we
accounts.
transferred funds, and that has to be recorded on your financial statements. You can't pretend these funds don't exist through your books. And when that happened, it triggered the DRA to be like, wait a minute, this is not you did not transfer this to your trust. And then it's like, well, maybe it's not a trust. I'm like, no, it is an expendable, the facilities fund is an expendable trust.
We know that, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that they're going to want to give the money to one town.
Well,
It's not.
I mean, I don't wanna pay my federal taxes, you know?
But if it's 7 towns that are one district,
I guess my question would be to Ruby's point, if it's mandated by law, why do we even have to have a vote?
Well,
Because the option is when the
Because
warrant
you said you
articles
have
go
to,
together.
right, I mean,
hold
I
on.
we don't write the laws.
okay, but
It is what it is,
somebody.
at some point, I guess I would say, we could argue this all night, it is the law that it has to be with the trustees, so it needs to go on a warrant
And it
article.
can't be
Hold
the
on.
school board.
No.
why can't we put in an article to convert whatever trust funds we have to capital reserve funds?
Capital
Both
reserve
are-
still have to
Those
go.
need to have a trustee as well, so that was the next, that's part of it. It's the holders of the trust funds and custody of the school district reserves.
And you can't make as much money from capital reserve funds either, because they have to be instantly available at all times. Other trust funds, you can invest in a different way.
It really is the job of the trustees to just make sure that the request coming from a body, which changes all the time, is going towards the rules of that fund. So for example, let's say the owners of a scholarship put $500,000 in the scholarship and had very strict rules. And 50 years later, someone's like, well, no one's qualified for that scholarship for like 4 years. There's $2 million in it. The school really needs a new gymnasium. Why can't we just use those funds for that? There's no trustees to protect the people that put that money and set up the rules for that fund aren't there to protect it anymore. So they designed the trustees to be a protector of that. And that's the logic behind it.
there's no problem with that
Yeah.
logic. The problem will be that 1/7 of the district is holding that responsibility instead of one representative from all 7 towns.
There's gotta be other multi-town school districts.
Yeah.
How do they handle this?
By these two situations, the district where the district was created, Bristol, or where the first trust fund established. So, actually, those are the two. Regional school districts should appoint a town to be the holder of the trust funds when the district is created, so it should have been done then. Or 2, the first trust fund is established. We didn't do either one of those.
So are we grandfathered in?
That Bristol was established.
Well,
Well, we say that because it's checked on the box.
She sent me the file and said, Bristol's supposed to be the one, because that's where you were established. So technically, that should be the one, but I don't have any records, they don't have any records of a warrant article stating that. So there should have been, when you establish the trust fund, that's when you name them.
Right.
You don't wait till afterwards or anything else, and that just wasn't done here.
But
So
can the board designate the trustees?
They have to accept it.
you would create a warrant article according to the RSA.
So,
Custody of school district
Right, this
reserves.
language came directly from the DRA as to recommendation on how to fix this.
so maybe we should be creating our own board of trustees for trust funds for the school district.
Well, our RSA 35-2 says the custody of school district reserves. Whenever, this is for the reserve, whenever any capital reserve of a school district is established, the same shall be held in custody by the trustees of trust funds of the town wherein the school district lies, or, in case of a school district embracing 2 or more towns, by the trustee of trust funds of that town which the voters of the school district may elect.
Anyone in
Okay,
7
which-
towns.
Yes.
So the voters of the school district, which are your people.
Or could you stretch the interpretation of that to say, as Jeff suggested, or to the trustees of the trust fund that the school board decides, the school board votes to name? And
I can certainly present that. I tried to get her to, because I know, you kind of know how this meeting's going to go when you have to present this.
Well,
So-
trustees of the trust fund is an elected position. Does the school board have the authority to create elected positions?
I really can't answer that. I don't believe the school board has the authority to do that because you're not the one electing those positions. I mean, you can,
But could we,
the underlying towns may be able to do that,
But
which
we-
goes back to this RSA.
there's a head trustee of trust funds in each town. So couldn't we write this article to say that the trustees of trust funds of the district is made up of
Yeah, you could put a warrant article.
one of the trustees from each of the 7 towns?
We can ask.
Yeah, ask.
Tell you what,
I don't know.
no idea is crazy around here, so we will present that. I'll present that, and then we may,
I know, no.
we'll go and look, because, I mean, they made legislation just for you, for the school, so I wouldn't put any of that out of the possibility.
Yeah, because
So let's,
what'll happen is maybe we should just, if we can't do it, just see how the vote goes and then we'll worry about it.
Terry,
that's probably a good idea. 'cause-
I mean, we can ask DRA,
I'll
I
ask.
mean, if, you know, whether we can make up something, create our own trustees of the trust fund in some fashion.
In the
Terry
warrant,
wants to say something.
you need to add an S to the trustee.
That's right. Trustees. of the
Trustees.
trust funds. 'Cause there's-
All right, moving right along. Oh, boy.
Okay, so more to come on that one. Article 5 is, I put $60,000 in here because that's what you have had in the past, is to increase, to add 60,000 into the expendable trust fund. Article 6, I left blank. This was the one you weren't sure, you actually have a capital reserve fund for special ed that was established already. So this is again just looking to raise and appropriate up to a dollar amount to transfer in from the undesignated fund balance.
And if you say up to a certain amount, it will be denied by the state and finally, not afterwards voting. Because we had that happen in Alexandria. You
Oh, that
have
should
to
be allowed.
designate a specific amount.
I've always done up to,
Really? We couldn't do that.
Up to a specific amount.
yeah, up to $60,000.
We
Yeah,
couldn't
it's not
do it.
like-
We've said up to $5,000.
Because what happens if
a
you said
specific
60,000 and you only had 50,000 left?
fund.
I'm not gonna vote for this.
You could vote for
Typically
whatever
with
you
capital
want. You
reserves,
asked me to put them on
I
there, so I
don't
did
make this,
them.
this is a unique situation, because actually, when I presented the tax cap information, I put those warrant articles as what would be adding to what would be capped, but technically worded this way, that 60,000 would not play into that number, because you'd actually have to vote what was left of the budget, right? So it would not come from, so within the proposed budget, we'd have to have savings of 60,000 or less before funds would be, you'd elect to transfer funds into that reserve.
Isn't it?
What?
Is it from this year's
This
budget?
year's
What's left
budget.
from this year's
Yeah,
budget?
left
Well,
over from the
right,
year.
right. Yeah, so it would be savings, so it actually has no effect on the 2015 budget.
Okay, but you're talking about Article 5.
5 or 6.
Okay, well, I'm talking about Article 6.
Okay.
So where did the need for Article 6 come from?
We just talked about it at the last meeting, and you said you weren't sure, so I said I would just develop it, and you could make a decision on whether you wanted it or not.
I honestly don't remember that. What, does anyone
can
else
take it off.
remember that we decided to put
I
a,
didn't make it
No
up.
contingency for that anymore, so if you were to
That
have
was part of
almost
the
left over,
conversation.
it would go to that.
right, but the retained balance is the
Yeah,
contingency.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't vote for this, and neither would anyone else who remembers that they gave us $350,000. So, I don't even want to put this on the warrant, personally.
Everything on this page is up to your decision to go on the
Okay,
warrant or
all
not.
right, yeah,
You can tell me right now you don't want it, and I'll take it off. I developed it because at the
Okay.
last meeting, it was mentioned
All right,
to put it on
I
there.
guess I forgot, sorry. The other thing I gotta tell you is the operating budget's gotta be the last article. Everybody.
Again, the
Yeah.
order of the articles can change.
Yeah, okay,
So is it a consensus to take 6 off?
that's a yes.
Yeah.
So 7 is your operating budget, we'll fill in those numbers along with the defaults as we get those. Article 8 is a new one I developed for the school resource officer, and I think I hit what you wanted.
Not what I want.
I put said officer will be on top of the cost. For the hiring of a school resource officer for the Newfound Regional High School. Said officer will be available to support all schools within the Newfound Area School District and shall be employed for the school year only. And if approved, this amount will become part of the default budget for the 2016 fiscal year.
Did you run this by DRA?
No, after this, if, we will run them all by DRA.
Okay.
Yeah, we will submit
This is
anything
hot off
that's
the press
voted
today.
on. We figured half these may be voted completely out right here during this meeting, so I'm not gonna be sending them all.
My only concern about that article not whether or not it passes, but the writing of the article is that last sentence, and whether or not that is actually true. Whether or not it actually becomes part of the default budget.
It does if you write it in here. And that was off of sample
Yeah.
warrant articles.
And it wouldn't it be the 2015 default budget?
Yeah, Stacy didn't make these up either, they are based on language from
Yeah.
other warrant articles.
Yeah.
I didn't think.
That would be a question whether it was 15 years.
Well, no, because this is saying this is going to be for the 15 school year, so then if it's approved through this, then next year's
Goes
default,
into
it
the
would be
16.
part of it, would be the 16.
Oh, that's true.
Do you have a preference for the order? I can reorder them.
Yeah, definitely the operating budget's gotta be last. I would put, I'd put the SRO,
Stick the SOO, you're all
right
set.
at the front.
Well, we agreed to
Isn't there-
put it in as an article to let the voters decide.
Right, right. And then the question of whether we're gonna need the teacher contract agreement and provision for a special meeting.
If we have an agreement or not. Yeah.
Well, we should probably go with both of them, right?
Yeah, so what you'll see is, so the next page, is a outline of kind of where we're at and what we need to do. I have a couple of questions to ask and clarification on, but, this will basically help us outline. So basically at your next meeting, we'll have had, the budget committee will have finalized their budget. We'll have had a budget hearing, they'll have voted on a budget, so we'll have numbers. So at your next school board meeting, actually the timeline flows nicely. Your next school board meeting in January, you'll need to approve the warrants with the numbers in them to move to deliberative session. And so I have that outlined, so basically, what you'll.
January 13th, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what you'll see here is, I've tried to outline what's coming up, your school board meetings, your budget committee meetings, we've got mediation. January 3rd is the last date to post for the budget hearing, which will be done. We have a budget committee meeting tentatively scheduled for January 7th if we need it. January 10th is the budget hearing. January 13th is your board meeting, so, one of the things I have to do with the budget committee tomorrow is schedule in a meeting probably right after that January 10th budget hearing for them to approve a budget. So at your January 13th meeting, you'll need to sign your warrants, your budget, and your default. And we'll talk about the plan for deliberative session. January 14th is the last date to post your budget hearing, so we'll have done that already. The
Lloyd,
14th is the last day for petition warrant articles, if we have anybody who's submitting those. 14th is also the last day for any collective bargaining agreements. The 17th is the budget hearing snow day. So if we end up with a snow day, it's gonna screw up our entire calendar, so we're gonna hope we don't have snow that day. The 21st, just a reference, last day to hold a budget hearing. The 22nd is the first date for candidates to file. The 22nd, this is just for us, is we try to incorporate a bunch of things in here, is we need to send a letter to the supervisor of the checklist. The 24th is all reports for the annual report are due to the SA office, so I think that Vincent, you write a report, so that needs to be to us by the 24th. The 27th is the last day to post warrants, budget and default. January 27th, we have a school board meeting. The 31st is the last day for candidates to file. We've got deliberative session on February 1. By February 4th, we need to send the annual reports to the printers. February 8th is snow date for deliberative session. The 20th, we just put the ballots are due to the town offices. The 18th, if I got those backwards, is the SAU.
How do we do annual reports to the printers after the deliberative session? Help me out on that.
How do we do them after?
Yeah.
Because the annual reports come after the deliberative session.
Does it incorporate items that were in the deliberative session?
Yeah, it's your final warrant, it's your final everything.
Oh, those.
That needs to go into those reports.
Not for sure.
It's not this one,
Okay.
yeah. Let's see, we need to, by March 3rd, get the minutes to the DRA. March 4th, annual reports are due out. March 11th is your voting day. So those are just kind of basic timelines.
All right, well, what we've got to figure out here is our mailing that we did the last couple of years.
So that's my big question. So I have a couple of questions. So this is what I found. So we have this. This is what you gave out for deliberative session. Now, so we tried to squeeze that into the timeline, and interestingly, from your budget hearing to the time frame to get this done and printed is about 1 day.
You know, like we got right at the end last time, they had to run right off the post office.
Yeah, so I had suggested to Vincent, and you can do it, I'll do whatever you need me to do, but, this is a great thing for the voters to go to the polls with. Deliberative session, the plus of deliberative session is whoever's there, here's the story, because you have a moderator, you can speak to the articles. When you go to the polls, they have nothing. So this is a great vehicle, as opposed to for deliberative session, it's a great vehicle to send to people for when they're going to vote.
That's how we got them out to the deliberative session, was with that. That's what brought them out.
You assume that people will take that with them on election day,
Or review them for election day.
review them in advance, yeah.
I mean, honestly, you can do whatever you want, but,
Yeah, the intent behind that has been anyway, to get people to understand what we're gonna talk about to create the numbers that will go on the ballot. And even that is a challenge, to get them to
Yeah. Oh,
understand that
definitely.
that's what they're doing.
so, I mean, if you wanna stick with that for the deliberative session, we can do that, but it's gonna need lots of muscle to get that done, because I
Yeah, we
think
gotta
it's
have
about
it
a
out for
2-day
them. That's an
turnaround.
important time, otherwise all the school teachers will be there and the public won't be there.
Well, they are the public, your school teachers are your public, and your school
I
teachers
know,
are your
but
taxpayers in this town
if
as
you're
well.
directly concerned, you're there, and if you don't know what's going on, you won't.
But if anything's changed at the deliberative session, then the voters won't know what was changed.
Yep. It worked. That's all I can say, it worked great. That's the only way to do it, right?
Well,
Get them.
what's the sense of the board on changing it from the perspective Stacy's offering us?
Right? Is there any way of finding out when it went out last year? I think it came out before,
might be
Right
This is
before-
it, this is
before they
it.
voted, not
We-
before the deliberative
Yes, right.
session.
Yeah, this is
Oh,
it, this
Sue and
came
I
out
did
for,
it.
for the
I don't
deliberative
know if I
session.
still got mine home, so I
No,
put the
clearly,
bill on or anything
what
on.
Lloyd says is the fact. It was intended to get people to go to the
So
deliberative
they wanted to
session.
see what the articles were, and we had meetings and everything.
Yeah. It'll work.
That worked, yes, but all the people there.
But
Well, that combined with it being
Big turnout,
Saturday.
big turnout, big interest.
You didn't get as many as,
No, I ripped out.
Then you get a
mine.
full.
it's a 2 million cut year.
How were those addressed?
I don't know, I wasn't there.
Resident.
Because
I have no idea.
Well, it's a good question, Jeff, because the first year we did it, we learned something about that, because some people, few, didn't get it in
Well-
time.
Well,
It
not
didn't
only
go to
that,
032.
Like River
64.
Road,
there's,
our Plymouth.
Well, like post office got mixed up in the.
I think there was some
Where the
misunderstanding
roadie
about
was
PO
from.
boxes or something.
No, it didn't go to the people in Bridgewater, whoever Plymouth zip code.
well, let me
There was
throw
a
out
PO
this
box.
out to you. I have a Plymouth address. The entire northern part of Groton has a Rumney address.
Yeah, the Romney people were missed too.
Yeah,
That's
you
right.
call
You
the
know, I
post
mean-
office, I did at the time for that, but
So it kind of worked.
I mean, if you look at the registered voters in Groton,
Yeah,
if
I
you look
would,
at the list, most of them are Rumney.
yeah, I submit that Mike would have to, I suggest you give Dan a call and find out what he learned for the second year to make sure that it gets done properly. Because we don't wanna spend the money on that and then have it get done incorrectly. Now, that being said, are we gonna meet again?
Yeah, fine,
To review it, I mean, we'll have the digital copy, but the question is it really one day?
It's, so, you have the budget hearing on the 10th, so if the board meets on the, if the budget committee meets on the 10th, which would be my recommendation, they meet after the budget hearing and make final decisions, you'll
Right.
have the information. The deliberative session is scheduled for February
First,
1st. The printers need at least 2 weeks, Or no, Sue said because it's this, she said she thinks she can push them through 1 week.
Yeah.
So, and then you want probably not the week before, but the week before that towards you probably, so if I back up to the third week of January is, like the beginning of that week is probably when you wanna get them to the post office to go out by the end of,
Yeah, so you're
That
really
third
not
week.
far off, I'm looking at January
Yeah.
15th.
so you're talking like, I think it's like a week, it's like only a couple of days in between.
Last year, we met on the 17th of January to work on those, to finalize.
The last day for the petition warrant articles, we had to get those all in first.
So why don't we meet on January 17th again, can we? Assuming there was no snow date for the budget hearing.
Can someone tell me what day of the month that is?
Friday,
It is a Friday.
Yeah, it's on our
and
list.
last year it was on a Thursday.
Mhm.
What day?
January 17th.
It is a Friday.
We sort of edited.
So let's pick another.
What's wrong with
It's a Friday. It depends on what time you put it.
Well, last
when
year we
you get
met
to
on
the
a
printer, it's
Thursday,
Monday.
we could do the
It would be
16th,
the
No way
same
you
thing
can
as
get it out.
sending it Monday.
maybe the 16th, which is a Thursday, like,
I think we have 2-hour Thursday things at school. I don't have January written in, but I think
That should be enough time, because we would get it to you,
Yeah, if we had it finalized on the 17th
and you'll
and
get
ready
it.
to go, we can get it to the printers. Well,
On the
it's
20th?
tight on the 20th. It's on the 17th.
And you'll
And
get
ready
it,
to go, we can get it to the printers. Well,
On the
it's
20th?
tight on the 20th, and then it's, no, because if we get it back on the 24th, if we get it back on the
do we
24th,
have to hand deliver it to the printer? You can't send it electronically?
oh, I'm sure we can.
Yeah, no,
Next
it-
time, yeah.
So we can get it to them
You
on
gotta have it in
the
the mail by the 15th.
They wouldn't,
But they're not gonna
do
sell
anything on the
it.
17th.
That brings another issue up. If we can send it digital, we have parents fill out their email address. Do we have a database for that?
no, this isn't.
Yeah, I
this
don't think
isn't-
you
The only problem is it's also, you're
It's going to-
limiting the scope of who you send it to. If
Yes,
it's
it's
just
going to
parents.
75 parent people, which is the registered, the.
Right, but I'm
taxpayers.
saying in addition, I mean, it doesn't cost anything to send an email.
I'm not sure if we
Yeah,
can
but-
use that.
We would have to have a blanketed, that's the thing with a mailing like this, it goes to all tax addresses, right? We're all, and if we just send it, you're just, it would be not exactly a unbiased selection.
Yeah.
Right.
I would
That's the
also
only
worry if
problem.
parents didn't give their email addresses for those kind of solicitations.
Yeah,
You
I
definitely don't wanna
For
read about that in the
solicitation.
paper if a vote is swayed possibly by that, right?
More impressive, everything.
So we just have to work hard to.
It's the potential.
First, what's
In
the
2 years, I've never
Yeah.
seen this
January
publication.
Before February
Yeah.
1st.
So-
Would that be-
Yeah, it would come up on my stamp.
Yeah.
No, it's like mail in Plymouth.
Yeah, that's what I said.
My tax
It's like
address is in
basically
Plymouth.
that week.
We gotta
like
wait.
the-
My property tax bill goes to
On
Plymouth, to
14.
my address.
How about,
Do you wanna do two mailings, one, two that discusses it before the vote? No?
how about if we plan
I don't know why
on
it's-
the, after the board meeting, that Monday night,
Who's that?
and we'll just keep the agenda short.
We gotta go after the 14th and all the petitions.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing we can do.
I mean, it's already done.
Yeah, to Lloyd's point, you have to wait.
Yes. What's the date, what's the date? That's true.
And the warrant articles.
That's right.
So this guy gets-
Are you putting something in?
I'm putting something in Bristol, though, I'll warn you all now.
Okay, the 15th. What's the 15th?
Wednesday, I don't know.
So if we have the possibility, like Sue has all the possibilities of that hearing,
That's something.
already,
That was the previous year.
all we have to do
Those
is
are
send it
effective
that day.
meeting dates, that's effective.
Right, it's just a matter, I mean, this is,
So
But I
we
mean,
can
we
send it
did
out.
do the
like a lot of
eleven,
this
we
is,
did do
this
registration.
was a
You need most everybody.
warrant article, so there's lots of space there.
That's what we did last time, didn't we?
I mean, I
But
can
we could already finish all that. Like, we could just take it in.
I did a mail-in.
The date of the next meeting is January 13th.
I have an intern coming in.
Yes.
I didn't send- I
The
didn't send
second
it.
Monday down.
But we're talking about a group that more than 3/4 of the money.
One, five, 6, 5, 1.
More than 3/4 of the money.
15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, 32nd, 33rd, 34th, 35th, 36th, 37th, 38th, 39th, 40th, 41st, 42nd, 43rd, 44th, 45th, 46th, 47th, 48th, 49th, 50th, 51st, 52nd, 53rd, 54th, 55th, 56th, 57th, 58th, 59th, 60th, 61st, 62nd, 63rd, 64th, 65th, 66th, 67th, 68th, 69th, 70th, 71st, 72nd, 73rd, 74th, 75th, 76th, 77th, 78th,
Then he was a good percentage of his fund.
6
Yeah.
o'clock instead of
That's
6:15.
My office, all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's that?
Because he
Is
was
it-
posted
it's
for
us.
his level.
Well, I know, we could ask for a volunteer to
Right.
run your app.
All right, January 15th, Wednesday, 6 p.m.
6:15, what's that?
And it opens at what, 8:00?
What day?
Still people here.
Meeting at his office on Wednesday the 15th at
He
6
uses it in the post office.
the day after the petition warrant article.
work for a living, you'd never be
We could even work on a rough draft of that in advance too, because most of it's gonna be predefined, right? So,
Right.
So we
That's
have
what
this.
We did, we
Yeah.
kind of edited and everything.
That's all we end up doing is
Yeah.
editing it.
so
What,
if you make
what do
all
you
your
want us to do?
possibilities in the
Like, do you
draft.
want us to start kind of editing for you? Do
Sue-
you wanna?
Yeah, Sue's got the template for that.
Yeah, okay,
The earlier she can get it to each of us, we can start working on it.
okay. So do you want us to do some of it? I just don't wanna I don't wanna start it and then have you guys start it also and then have it,
No, you should start it through Sue.
Okay.
I'm suggesting because she created that.
okay, and
format.
maybe like the week before that, we can get it to you guys.
Yeah, the
so that
sooner
you
you
can-
can get it to us, the better.
Yeah.
And stuff that we know is final, you know, as Mike said, we'll just start editing with what we've got.
Yep.
Because the issue is the amount of real estate we have left and the words we can stick in there,
Yep.
you know, depending on how many warrants. So,
Perfect. Yeah, okay, so we'll do that. So just on the bottom, some of these we don't have to answer now. I did set up babysitting, so that's all set on the bottom for deliberative session. Do you typically have your attorney,
yeah, Barbara,
Yeah.
and
Barbara? Okay, just so I can give her the dates. Anything else we can discuss later? Then just a question on the town report, as we're starting to think about that and put that together.
town
Yeah, I
report.
mean, the school district report, I'm used to doing it, a town and a school together. Do you want it to look exactly like this? Do you want it to stay the same? The reason I ask is it's pretty big, and it must cost you a fortune. There's a ton of pages in the back with data. Some of that data I'd like to try to include on this. So things like when you talk about the teacher's contract, that's a great place to put
I don't want to
teachers.
get too much involved in that stuff from that. We don't want to get involved in that, just the articles and the budget. If you put too much in, you're gonna lose it.
So
Start going to stuff, you know?
basically, this whole back section is optional. This
Yeah.
is not required.
But that's an article. That would be an article.
So I just didn't know how much, did you want to keep it exactly the same?
No, nobody reads the
Yes,
whole thing.
Something to think about.
I'm in favor of going Spartan and see who complains about not having enough data, because then we can refer them to the data task force.
There you go. Like, that's a lot of that excitement. I was looking at it and saying, oh, you have a lot of stuff in here that really isn't required to be in here. And I just think
Can I
about
sit
when you
for a
start to
second?
thinking about costs.
Yeah. I just wanna
No
see.
gag,
okay,
I'm
so-
open to keep it all in there.
All right, well, first, there's a whole long list of, yeah.
Like, there's lots of things in there, like,
Nothing.
you have lists of staff. and-
No, there's maybe something, we have student counts, that might matter.
Yeah, there's some
We could
data
throw
that I
in
think is
enrollment
important.
numbers along with the budget.
Grant funds, no, not really.
Some of
Okay.
it's legally
Some of it,
required, some
yeah,
of the
you
budget
probably
stuff,
have to.
your minutes are required.
Well, there we finally get into something that I might be looking for, the budget. Do you know what I mean?
But
Like,
there
that's the
are
average
some
voter.
things like the grants and so forth. you probably
I know,
have
but
to-
the average voter, what do they wanna know? What am I, we're
What are we
talking about money
voting
today,
on?
so what are we talking about, yeah?
Well, the town reports are always a smaller format, but they usually have more pages, so I don't know if there's a cost savings there.
I would opt to go as Spartan as we can.
Okay,
I
we'll
would
work on
challenge
that.
you with that. Keep it legal, but
Yep. All I have on that topic.
some of these other questions we can,
Yeah, yeah.
setup, that's all Mike.
For what?
Gotta rearrange the chairs.
Yes, we're gonna do a few rehearsals, like we did just before this.
We have a rehearsal dinner? Can we have a rehearsal dinner?
We are? It's just gonna be you and me, and it's gonna be at the, well,
He
we'll
likes
talk about
pizza.
that later.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously, you need to get guidance from Fred and some of the folks that know what's going on in the auditorium, but we have lights along the front for both the budget committee and the board, because you can't see
Certainly.
anything.
I took a similar comment that was made to heart, and we have already done some research on that topic.
Good.
Probably looking at some systems that don't weigh 1,000 pounds that would give us a possibility of streaming media directly live even. Using our Google platform as a possibility. And I've even talked with Mike Capone, the town manager at Bristol, about possibly piggybacking on somewhat how we handle board meetings, to give you an option, not necessarily that's what we would do. And why the school district doesn't have anything to do with the use of cable franchise fees, which we relied on heavily in the city of Dover. And believe it or not, you get, the towns receive cable franchise fees too. So maybe we could share some resources on those. So I've had a few conversations on that. Hopefully it'll give you some possibilities, at least some improvements maybe in how the equipment's deployed too.
Okay.
This is pretty intense in wires, and it's gonna cost us almost $1,000 to do some fixing up on it, so.
Okay, as far as this other stuff goes, Stacy, we'll look at that at the next board
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, definitely.
But we will have babysitting, we will
Yeah,
for
I
that.
already talked to
You know that.
the high school.
And just make sure the parking lot's plowed adequately.
Will
There
do.
was complaints on that.
It's not gonna snow.
so.
We got
Or
through
well
today, no
sanded
snow
by
day,
then.
it was good.
Sanded too, yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about being well sanded on the ice, packs down, that sort of thing. Okay, so we're done with the item 9D. Brings us to 9F, policies for first reading. What?
All right, we've got JN, student fees, fines and charges. We had to strike report cards or transfer of records, maybe withheld until all obligations are met. We can't withhold that stuff, even if they owe us money. We changed it to read, failure to meet obligations may result in social probation which prohibits participation in any athletic, co-curricular, or non-academic activity.
That's participation.
That's what I said.
That's all it is. You gotta fix that.
What's that?
Participation.
I don't know that athletic needs to be capitalized.
Actually, participation.
Yeah, you're right, athletic doesn't need to be capitalized.
Eagle eyes right there.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Got the grammar police out here.
All right, who's gonna effect these edits?
Sue does the editing, yeah, if we can just report back to her. And then we have the field trip approval form.
We do have the added funding source.
Since everybody was complaining about the form and information, we think we have a form that will work.
Do you need to have miles and destination of trip?
Well, we don't need the mileage, because everybody was putting on there, you know, it's 47 miles when it could have been 500. What it comes down to is, we took out non-essential information. The destination of the trip is, where are you going? If they tell us where they're going, we can figure out how many miles that is.
Well, and they have to compute it for the total cost of the field trip, because they have to include transportation
Yeah.
before it can be approved.
Right.
But why should we be figuring out the number of miles?
We don't need to figure it
We
out.
don't.
Well, it would
But having it on the form,
give us a basis of knowing whether they've included enough cost for the field trip.
Well, the principal shouldn't be signing it unless it's completed, and we wouldn't be approving it if it wasn't completed, and neither would Stacy.
And we don't need to be figuring out or arguing in a meeting whether it's 20 miles or 30 miles from here to Waterville Valley.
Because we had field trips last year to the same place that was to different miles. Yeah. So we were gonna leave it to the administration and.
We're hoping this coincides also with a purchase order. So there's been kind of a breach in the use of purchase orders at the school district. So a field trip should have a purchase order given for the vendor. If they're going to the Science Museum, how much is it gonna cost? They shouldn't bring a checkbook down there with them. You know, that doesn't make any sense. And there should be a purchase order for whatever the billing is for transportation. And if they have all those, then the vendor's signing off on those costs as well. So it's a little bit epidemic, and we're trying to improve a lot of these processes. Some of them have been neglected for a long time. So we don't want to make constant changes. So we're looking at some ways to improve multiple processes with single strokes. So we have a running list, and all the way from HR processes to purchasing in general, from professional development. So I don't want to run just a purchasing policy for one item like field trips. I'd like to make it something that's structured and is also easy for the administrators, because you don't want to have them bogged down in paperwork either. So our purchase ordering process is digital. So it makes the approvals very fast. Now, this specifically is a board approval. Not all of our purchase orders require that. So before they can even put in a PO, they need to have the okay from the school board to make that
This only
correct.
requires our approval if it's overnight or out
Oh,
of state.
okay.
Yeah.
So I still, that would be a requirement though for their PO for that exact instance. So in those cases, we should say, and if it's overnight or whatever, or out of state, then it would also, their PO must include an attachment of this form. Does that make sense? And then same thing with professional development. So if their purchase order requires a superintendent's approval, they would have to attach that approval to it, and then it would follow a sequence. So we're trying to develop a process.
But
Go
but
ahead.
we don't need that. We're just signing this form when it comes to
You don't,
us.
but we do,
Right.
because we're trying to show you that these processes, as far as funding goes, they shouldn't make that mistake. I think that's really what I'm getting at. They wouldn't make the funding mistake where they show up and be like, oh, by the way, it didn't cost 400, it cost 4,000. You know, that won't happen.
Okay. Any other comments, because I'm in charge and I'm gonna call for a motion to accept these. First reading.
The field trip approval form, I think we've seen like 5 times.
Yeah.
The committee worked on that
Okay,
one.
so do I have a motion to approve JN with edits made and 2CAF for first read?
So moved.
Okay. And the second was Lloyd? All those in favor say aye.
Oh, wait,
Aye.
you're stepping on a crack. What are you doing?
What do you mean? Oh,
You're
yeah,
supposed
that's
to wait.
right. Forget
Oh my
it, we
gosh.
have action later. Okay, I don't need a
We
motion.
move faster when he's not here.
So we can move on, sorry.
We get it all done now.
Policies for
We'll
second
have it all done
reading.
before he gets back.
Yeah, hurry up.
Okay, Jeff, vote.
Okay, the policies for the second reading, you've seen them all once already. There's no changes to them since the last time you saw them.
Okay.
I might be lost.
Any concerns about those? All right,
What's on the agenda?
these are all gonna go on that consent agenda, right?
Let's get moving on that before he gets back.
Okay, we already did H, we're on to J. Review of letter reference land availability on School Street. It's not for Sue and I, you notice, it's made out to gentlemen.
Yeah.
What is it
Alright,
tonight?
we know a comment. So, I received a letter, on behalf of the board, the gentleman on the board, not the ladies on the board apparently. The house actually right next door to Bristol Elementary School is, going up for sale. It's an estate sale, I'm assuming that whoever was living there has passed away. And they sent us a letter asking if we were interested in purchasing, that piece of property. It is the house, if you're coming, from the main road, what's that?
104.
104, take a right, it's past the Bristol Elementary School, it's the next house. It's a small ranch, I think it's white with green trim. That's the house, that's the piece of property for sale, so.
If you took a right on to
Is it
North
North
Main,
Main?
by the bank, is that the one?
No,
No,
Next
next to
one.
Bristol Elementary School.
Yeah, you actually can't take a right there because it's a one-way street.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you
Take a
can,
right.
can a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah.
I
Right.
was past them and then they reminded me.
Yeah, you gotta go up from the,
Oh, because you
Yeah.
can't go all the way up that
Because-
way.
yeah.
Oh, yes, you can.
Well, anyway,
Oh.
so the place next to the school.
So if the
That's an
school is
acre.
here,
You could
there's
do
some
it.
trees here, and
Yeah.
then the house is right
And
next
then
to
the
it.
house, so it's on School Street.
It's on School Street,
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the north of the school.
Yes.
You know how much land was it?
An acre.
An acre.
It says in here
It's
it's an
about
acre.
an acre. I did talk to the attorney Dorcas Gordon today, and I wrote the number down. I asked her, like, did you have any idea of what they were selling it for? And I want to say it was around 160. It was, I think it was like
I thought it might have been
156.
Ralph Ford's land.
But,
I was hoping.
That's next to the middle
Well, that'd be
school.
good together. We can get
that's
people.
kind of the appraised value of it. It's, she didn't say that that was the cost it was selling for. She hadn't talked to the state administrator about that yet. But that was kind of in a, where they were, it was kind of appraised at, so. I asked her just to get an idea for the board, so, I think it'll be a while before they actually do anything. I think it's gotta sit for 6 months in the estate. So it's not something to act on, but it is an opportunity for a piece of land that's right next to the elementary school.
But it would have to go on a
It would have to go on the warrant.
Would it
So you'd
make
want
a
to.
new SAU office?
parking lot.
It's Canal Better.
We don't have any parking there.
I don't,
Cars off the street.
I don't see any
Crossing land
future
for a
for
cell
the
tower.
BES property anyway.
What, Jeff?
I said, I don't see any future for the BES property anyway. I don't think it's the ideal place for any addition nor construction. I just, yeah, it's next door to the school, but it's on, the school's not in a great spot anyway. I think if we're gonna invest money, it'd probably be better to put it somewhere else.
You're a new school.
I'm just saying, we don't need a new school right now. And if we were, I don't think we'd be putting it there.
I'm waiting for that, empty that doctor's park up the street to make a nice SAU office thing. They'll have a hard time selling it probably. The old-
Oh,
You know what I mean?
up
They're building a new
on
place
Lake Street,
down.
yes, but I think that a dentist is going in.
Hey, I'm working at home
I
if you
thought it
need
was all
me
going
to.
in the.
You know, I thought the SAU office was going up behind the football field.
I think they're a good price.
And I said, piece of property up there.
You know, every
Yeah, I
time I
think
go and
they're
look out my
building
window, I say, what
something.
mistake they made, they didn't buy this whole thing.
My office in me?
Okay, how are we doing
Square
on,
foot triangle?
Yeah.
You're not hurting my feelings.
So, isn't even a triangle?
Is there a desire to think about doing something with this?
I thought things were inquired.
All right, well, if you want to take some action on it, think about it, you want to take action. Stacy, that brings us, I guess, to 9K, which is the recommendation for the structure of the school board facilities committee.
So I should have asked for this, can we table this?
Good idea.
Yeah.
Boy,
Well, I just honestly, it was my plan to work on it today, and then we
No
had some
hurry.
weather that I had to take care of,
We're
and
no
ended up
hurry.
having to cancel after school activities, so it sucked up a big portion
Thank
of
you,
the
Dad, we'll
day.
be gone, right? We won't bother them.
So I'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting, if that's okay. I just need a little bit more time
All
to
right,
put
well,
that together.
Then we'll entertain a motion to table at the point in time that we... And the next item is 9...